Welcome to Crypt Walkers, the podcast where the eerie and enigmatic come to life. Hosted by a police officer, Ryder,
But there was definitely something
in that house.
and his co-host, William,
Legitimacy first is more important.
director of WTCW Paranormal.
Hey guys, welcome to the very first episode of Crypt Walkers, a paranormal podcast hosted by me, Ryder, a police officer, and
William, a paranormal investigator.
what sets us apart from other paranormal podcasts? Well, as I've already mentioned, I'm a police officer. I'm going to be looking at things from a police officer's view. So we'll be looking at different topics such as hauntings, crazy mysteries, legends, and of course, personal stories that are submitted by you, the listener. We'll also have guests on the show, but what sets us completely apart is the angle in which we're going to look at things. We're going to be breaking these cases down and we're going to essentially pick apart the case from what is legend, what is fact.
As a paranormal investigator, I'll do my best to bring my perspective and my knowledge with over 3 years of experience in the paranormal field. My knowledge on spirituality, ghosts, demons, hauntings, possessions, things of that nature, and try to give a more theological explanation as to why some of these occurrences might be taking place.
Yeah, I am definitely looking forward to the dynamic that we're going to have over these episodes, over the course of this podcast. I've personally been really looking forward to this for many, many years. It took finding the right co-host, and finding you was just perfect. Like, I mean, the fact that we can have a 5-hour long conversation about this stuff and not get bored. The thing about this podcast is all theories and sides are going to be respected, no matter how quote unquote crazy they may be. The goal is that I learn something different, and so do you.
Well, Ryder, I think whenever a lawman is involved in any kind of paranormal story, it brings a different level of legitimacy to the case that is being covered, simply because lawmen are trusted with, information like that. So I just want to ask you a little bit what your background is and who you are, when it comes to, this field.
I have always had a speculative mindset and an investigative mindset. When it came to paranormal investigating, I have always handled my cases almost like a cop would. I would look at the surroundings, I'd look at the scene, I'd look at, what could be debunked and what couldn't be debunked. And I would take all of the elements and put it together, and it would generate a story, the conclusion of the case. And I have taken that also from a paranormal standpoint, but also into my professional background, because that's just what I am as a cop. You have to have an investigative, skeptical mind. And as much as I love ghost stories, which I really do, and I look forward to hearing our listeners' ghost stories as well as yours, but I'm always going to be investigative and inquisitive.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if that's a word, I don't know how to.
Yeah, that's a word.
I don't know
Yeah,
how to put it that way. I'm
mean-
always going to look at it with my head slightly cocked and
right.
wanting
Well,
to.
that's an important skill to have, especially in the police force. And like I said before, it adds that level of legitimacy because if a cop can put your ghost story in their head and believe you, and they've been trained from day one when they start as a cop to not believe what everybody says, that means something.
Right. I like to say that I've gotten pretty good being able to read people and not only be empathetic and understand where they're coming from, but also being able to determine if they're bullshitting me or not. So
Yeah.
yeah, by the way, listeners, there may or may not be some foul language in this podcast. So
Yeah, maybe a little bit, a little bit. So
just a little bit. We're not gonna like try to. We're not gonna try to be as foul
we're no
mouthed, but
we're no sailors. We're no sailors, but
no, we're definitely
you
not
know,
sailors. But it'll
it
slip
happens.
out. It will slip out. We'll try to
You
keep
know,
the F words down, the F bombs.
we're all adults here, so we're good.
We'll try to keep it PG-13 as much as we can.
Yeah.
So, William, how I know we've briefly kind of talked about it in the past, but obviously our listeners are just learning about us for the first time. What brought you into this? Like what drove you into being involved in the paranormal?
Yeah, so starting from the very first occurrence, when I was a kid, my mom, my two sisters, and myself, of course, we moved into a haunted house in Virginia Beach, Virginia. We rented it. Very nice neighborhood. Everything seems normal, you know. And the first couple months were pretty normal. I mean, I was a kid, so I'd be scared of the dark and not want to go around by myself. Normal kid stuff, nothing too, off the wall. But the problem started happening with me, my sisters, and my mom. We'd be in the house and we constantly felt like there was eyes on us. The sense of anxiety, which is not anything that's genetic with me and my family, and with this constant anxiety. And when it comes to like fight or flight, I tended to fight instead. So with me, I was about 9 years old. I was home alone. Mom was at work, sister was at school. And the master bedroom is where the two previous homeowners passed away. And that's who I believe was at the center of the haunting. My sister and my mom were gone, and I went into my sister's bedroom after being alone, sick, felt like somebody was watching me, and I went in there and I said, "Hey, if anybody's here, can you do something?" Because I just felt like I needed to confront whatever it was that had this grip on me, this constant anxiety. I mean, by that point, I didn't know what else to do. And my sister's birthday had just recently passed, and there were balloons, helium balloons, in the corner of the room. No fan or anything. And I mean, they just flew across the room. I mean, almost as if somebody spiked it across the room. And I slammed the door, and I mean, as the majority of people would, I ran my ass out downstairs, out the door, and all the way down the street to my buddy Matthew's house.
I
I
have
didn't come.
seen I've seen videos of cops doing that, so
Yeah, yeah. I literally spent the night at Matthew's house. I couldn't do it. And for the next 3 years, the haunting just got worse and worse and worse and worse, till a point where we had to get the house anointed by a Catholic priest from St. Nicholas Catholic Church. And I mean, it was a really intense haunting. I'm sure we could get into it in a future episode, but that was my spark, I guess you could say. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, for me it was what we call the Henderson house, what would later be called the Henderson house. And it was a pretty active haunting, damn near I would even say possibly demonic, but obviously that's no word just to throw around. But it's somewhat similar to yours, and I think that's why I connected so well with you was that we kind of have the same beginnings, especially with the age range, like
Yeah.
when it started for me, when it started for you. So yeah, I like to put the term of phrase. I think this was a match somewhat in heaven.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like I said, I've been like I mentioned to you off mic. I've been wanting to do this podcast for years, even before I became a cop. I really wanted to satisfy this itch. I wanted to explore these things and have an audience that would come along with us and feel like they're a part of it, you know, and really dive deep into these topics. I just needed a co-host. I needed to connect with somebody that, like I said, could talk with
Yeah.
a guy like me for 5 hours on end about a topic. Now, of course, our episodes we're going to try to keep it,
Yeah, about 30
30
minutes
minutes. Yeah.
is the expected. But for me, it was like
Jinx.
jinx. Yeah. Yeah, for me, it wasn't like I experienced that haunting and I moved out and I immediately was like, okay, now I want to be a paranormal investigator. For me, it was actually, after we moved out of that house, I haven't lived in a haunted house since. You know what I mean? Nothing like that. After a while, my belief started to fade. It was
Yeah.
almost like, I was so young. For the first occurrence that took place, I was 9 years old.
Hmm.
And by the time we moved out, I was 11 years old. And I was thinking, I'm like, man, maybe I was just like being crazy. Maybe just, maybe it was all in my head. I mean, I knew I saw those things, but it's still like you go around and you're not going to see anything like that in day to day life. So it's almost it's hard to grasp. So for me, I was just like, I
Not
don't
to
know.
mention the world kind of shapes your views on things. I just bumped
Yeah,
the mic,
and
but
yeah,
your
I
the world will shape your view, and that's kind of how we develop as humans. So
yeah. Yeah, I came from a very Christian family, so it was like,
I did as well. I did as well. Yeah.
yeah, I stopped believing as much until I got to a point I was 14 and I was watching all of BuzzFeed Unsolved. For people out there that watch BuzzFeed Unsolved, y'all know what's up. Shout out Shane and Ryan. Sorry,
This is gonna
and,
sound terrible, but I've never really seen it.
dude, it's so good. It's so good.
You think I
Um,
would, but
it's so good. It's super funny. And basically, I was watching it. I was like, man, I've seen ghosts, or I don't want to get a sued or whatever. I've seen Zach Bagans and them, and I've seen them go out, and it just looks kind of fake.
yeah,
And
everything's a
then
demon.
yeah,
Everything's a demon.
and then I watched BuzzFeed Unsolved, and I was like, this is pretty grounded. So I was like, you know what? Instead of sitting here and wondering if everyone is lying or if it's actually true or whatever, I'm just gonna go out and do it. What's stopping me? Right? Who cares? So that's what I did. I took my 4 childhood friends, and I was like, guys, let's rent out the most haunted house in our state, which is the Ferry Plantation House for Virginia. And we went there and we saw some pretty crazy stuff. This was in the summer of 2022, and that was my spark was when I was a kid living in a haunted house. But when I got my start in paranormal investigation, that was it. That was it right there.
The Fairy Plantation House, just from hearing your story on previous podcasts, I'd never even heard of it, and so I went online, I looked it up, and it's got an interesting story. So it'll definitely be one of the haunted locales that we'll be talking about in the future. In fact, I just realized I haven't even told our listeners exactly what we'll be discussing. Not entirely. We'll be discussing different hauntings, some famous, some not so famous. We'll be discussing crazy mysteries, unsolved mysteries, just really anything that has like a paranormal flair to it.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll get too much into like UFOs or what they're calling UAPs now, but just because there's so many podcasts that do it. But I don't know. We'll see what kind of lies in
Yeah.
our future as we go along. This is going to be a very dynamic podcast. So we will encourage our listeners to reach out to us and give suggestions as to what they want to hear about. Yeah.
Yeah, my expertise lies in religious studies, theology, as well as paranormal research. Ranging from techniques, equipment, etc. Which I always think it's funny when people try to explain it in a scientific manner, as if it's not ghost hunting, because it's really hard to make it professional in any capacity. But some people have found a way. And Ryder's expertise lies in also paranormal investigating, but he's a cop. He brings a different kind of perspective to it rather than your Joe Schmo Zach Bagans wannabe like myself. So you know
Right. Yeah. Every case I've worked on has always been okay. What can we prove is just what can be explained. What evidence do we have? Where does the evidence take us? But then there are the parts of the case that are not explainable. That's the sugar right there. That's what I love discussing about, because we could sit there and talk about it all day.
Absolutely. Because what I always like to say to people is they find out I do what I do, which is, ghost hunting, paranormal investigation, whatever you want to call it. And a lot of the times they'll be like, "Oh, I could never do that. That's crazy. This stuff's probably not even real." And my response is always, "Well, maybe it isn't real. Maybe it's all fake." But there's one truth in the fact that almost every single person you'll meet in your life has some kind of ghost story, some kind of unexplainable story, and that has to mean something.
Exactly. And that's also an element of this podcast. Our podcast will have full episodes every other week, but in the weeks in between, I'm going to have like a special mini episode, and it's going to be called Crypt Walkers Listener Encounters. And it's where we're going to encourage you guys as the listeners to send in your encounters, your stories, because as William said, almost everybody has some, even if you don't believe, there is stories that you have been told or that you've had family members experience. And so that's going to be a show where there's going to be no judgment, no nothing. It's just us having fun and listening and just going on and on about spooky stuff. So
Absolutely. And we'll make a TikTok page and an Instagram page. So, you'll if you're listening to this right now, you probably came from either one of those platforms. And to that we say
thank
hello.
you so
And
much
yeah,
for
hello,
joining
thank
us.
you.
Thank you for
Uh,
making us not seem like we're just crazy talking into a mic.
yeah, talking to nobody, writing letters to Santa Claus. Sorry if you still believe in Santa Claus. Didn't want to ruin the magic there, but
Damn it,
um,
William. You've already started us on a bad.
if you want to submit your stories, you can submit them via Instagram. Maybe there will be a point in time where you open a Google form. That would probably be easier, but we'll
Yes.
see. We'll be playing it by ear. So
For this
if you
first
guys,
for this first episode, at the end of the episode, we'll have like a sound bite that has the exact, because we're recording this way before we're actually posting it. We'll have a more standardized, so that way and it'll be in the show notes as well. Well, William, I think that about sums it up for this introductory episode. Everybody who's listening, I hope you really enjoyed it. Like I said, this is going to be an amazing journey, and we're happy that you're going to be along for it. Be sure to check us out wherever you listen to podcasts, and also be sure to, and this is going to sound just like a YouTuber, but they all say it because it is what it is. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, and follow us on all of our social media channels. Of course, it'll be linked in the show notes, but we're going to have a TikTok. Like I said, at the time of recording this is before we've actually done it. We will have a TikTok. We will have an Instagram. We'll have even a website. We're that old school. So
smash the like button.
Smash that like button wherever it might be. Who knows?
Smash that review button.
Yes. And even if you don't like us, just give us a 5-star review. You can even type all the bad stuff. Just give us a 5-star review. So that way others actually hear about us.
You give us some padding.
And last but not least, thank you so much for listening to us, because as William and I have talked off mic, it does seem kind of weird, just talking into a mic. So we definitely look forward to your feedback, and thank you so much for listening.
Are you ready to walk amongst the crypts with us? Subscribe now on your favorite podcast platform and never miss an episode. Don't forget to leave a review and share your own paranormal stories with us. We might feature them in an upcoming episode of Crypt Walkers, the Listener Files. Check us out on social media by clicking the link tree in the show notes. If you want to send in your own case or spooky story, email us at contact@cryptwalkers.net. Also, be sure to check out William's adventures with WTCW Paranormal by clicking his link tree in the show notes.